not in Kansas anymore.
I know Kung Fu. I could have been a contender.
I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
Bond, James Bond.
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
What's up, everybody, and welcome to the Mov.ie Podcast, where we talk about the latest and greatest movies. My name is Jimmy, and we have
Eric.
Hey, my name is Emmett. Nice to meet you all.
And today, this is episode 1, where we're going to talk about Dunkirk. Alright, so let's start going into it. Let's just start off with
Sorry, before we do anything, I want to make sure you guys know this is a full spoiler podcast. We are going to talk about everything that we saw in this film. Mm-hmm. So if you haven't seen it and you would like that to be preserved for yourself, then I would advise you to turn away until you have seen that film, because we're going to get into every detail.
Yeah, we're going to talk about every nitty-gritty bit about it, so be prepared.
So, I mean, we're fresh out of the theater. We were in there, I think, an hour ago.
Yeah, we were literally in there an hour ago when we first saw it.
Yeah, so these are
Edwards, Ontario.
You're going to tell them the location?
Yeah, why not?
Oh,
yeah,
great.
Edwards, Ontario cinema.
Yeah, beautiful theater. I recommend everybody go if you're in the area.
Ontario, California.
But, God, Jesus, just give them your social. But, okay, so sort of a warning, this is a fresh impression. There's something to be said about looking at a film back after having time to be retrospective, right? And we're definitely giving you that fresh impression. But there's also the advantage of just this is how we feel coming out of the theater. So let's get into our thoughts. Why don't you start, Jimmy?
The first thing I want to say is if you can, definitely watch it in 70mm IMAX.
Mm-hmm.
My God, it was beautiful. I haven't seen a movie that good looking in such a long time.
It was intended to be seen that way. I think. You really do have to see it that way.
Yeah, it just had this really, really gritty kind of realistic feel. Everything was so crisp.
In a way, it was like seeing an old movie. It was like seeing an older film. Somehow brought to life in a way that you can only experience in modern cinema. But that the sort of the colors and everything I was really reminded of the time that I went to go see Jaws for the 40-year anniversary. Mm-hmm. And seeing that on the big screen for the first time in the way that films were made back then and the quality of the picture back then, it really harkened to that. And so it's this beautiful marriage of old style and new modern filmmaking. So yeah, I mean, this is a very unique theater experience for me, but I have a lot of different angles. I come from a musical background, and so I have a lot to say about the music, but before we get into that, I'd like to hear your thoughts and just in general about the whole thing.
Yeah, let's just start talking about like the first few scenes, I guess, of the movie. I don't know what's the main character's name? It's like that movie is so hard to hear.
And see, that's kind of a thing too. I mean, there's so much to talk about, even with what you just said. But I don't remember. I don't remember what anyone's names were.
So I'm just gonna say the first shot is you see a group of soldiers walking down this alley. What I believe is
it's sort of like a market.
It's a city of Dunkirk, I believe.
France. It's a city of Dunkirk in France, but it's an alley, a street with apartments all surrounding it. And so you see these soldiers walk by, and they're just casually, lazily walking around, and then suddenly you hear gunshots. And you see them drop one by one as only one of them makes it out alive.
He's running for his life, frantically trying to escape the gunshots. His gun jams. He tries to fire back.
It's a very desperate situation, and it's also absurd because they are receiving flyers from I think the German military that is informing them that they are surrounded. And as those flyers are coming down from the sky and raining down there everywhere, the character that we follow, who makes it through that scene, is grabbing some of them and preparing to sort of just defecate in the street and use it as toilet paper.
He's gotta go.
It's a very sort of an interesting moment. It's humorous in a sort of dark and absurd way because like here is almost like a bureaucratic act of a nation telling a surrounded army that we're coming for you with colorful flyers, and then one of those soldiers individually taking those flyers and then deciding to use them as toilet paper. It's this very human and absurd scene, and it's an incredibly daunting way to start a movie of this scale, doing something so basic and so human, and I really love that.
Yeah, and it opens up, and when he escapes from the city, he enters the beachfront, and he looks out to the horizon, and on the beach and in the ocean are just thousands of British soldiers just waiting to go home to be evacuated.
The number that you get told is 300,000, and Christopher Nolan does an incredible job of really making you feel every single one of those numbers. I mean, there are so many human beings on that beach.
Yeah.
The scale is so massive.
Yes.
Is what it makes you feel like.
Absolutely,
especially with those cause Nolan has like these wide panning shots of the beach.
Yes,
like the first 20 minutes of the film, you feel like it's just wide shot, and then pans to different wide shot and cut to different wide shot, and then from the sky, and then from ground level, and so you really you get a grasp of it.
God, yes, it's art. It's like impressionist painting with film, with moving picture. It's really incredible. And those wide shots are part of the reason why I think I'm so dedicated to following Nolan's work. I was reminded immediately. There's some scenes where you've just got a amazing shot of cloud and ocean, and some fighters, some dogfighters, airplanes going down, and then sort of like the smoke trail and everything. And the way that he paints those pictures, I'm reminded of a lot of the moments in Interstellar when the Endurance is spinning past Jupiter right before they hit the wormhole. If you remember those moments.
I remember that.
I got to see that. I didn't get to see it in IMAX, but just that moment in the theater where you are confronted with just the daunting reality of the size of something so much bigger than you. And in that film, in Interstellar, it was Jupiter, and in this film, it's sort of like the vastness of the ocean. But Christopher Nolan does an incredible job of making the audience member sort of lose their breath at the majesty of something much bigger than they could ever be. And
it really gives you a sense of awe.
Oh my God, yes, so much. And I got that just like Eric was saying, right as we hit the beachfront, 300,000 men, and you don't doubt for a second that every single one of those men adds up to 300,000. It is just so many bodies. But speaking of the bodies and speaking of the physicality of it, as we were saying before we started recording, there really isn't a lot of gratuitous violence in the way that say like a movie that's similar, like Saving Private Ryan,
which I saw last night.
Yes, so that's very fresh for you.
Yeah.
Now Saving Private Ryan, we were in a group chat texting about this, and that film uses extremely graphic violence as a narrative device, and I think that's one of the reasons why that film is so impressive. And Dunkirk, Nolan uses the absence of violence and perhaps even the expectation of violence as a narrative device, and I thought that was brilliant.
That's what I want to say. That's what I want to say is key, is that this movie makes you feel tense.
Oh yes,
there's like a lot of tension and anxiety that you feel throughout the whole movie-going experience. When I first saw like how long the runtime is, it's only like an hour 47 minutes, and I was like, well, this movie's really short. I hope it's still good, but I can see like the pacing, how everything was laid out. It was the right amount of time, because you feel like your palms are sweating the whole time. At least my palms are sweating the whole time.
And that is entirely the fault of Hans Zimmer. And I want to go into the whole thing about the music and why it's responsible for that feeling, but I won't get into that yet because I swear I'll derail this entire conversation. So the absence of violence is something though that I really want to get into.
Okay.
Because in a war movie, it is precisely what you'd expect, and it is not that you don't see death on screen and you don't see people falling and dying, but I don't think that I ever saw blood until there was a moment in the boat when the boy hits his head, and he is the only I think civilian casualty, but his is the only blood that I think I ever saw on screen. And I thought that must have been completely deliberate, because the only person who seems to suffer violence and the only time that you ever see that blood, it happens away from the battlefield. And I think that anticipation of violence, the anticipation of graphic gore, it never gets there. And that's another thing that leaves you up in the air. It gives you that sense of tension. And I guess speaking of tension, I don't want to get into the music too much, but I swear one of the things that if you're paying attention to the score at all, there is a ticking clock for maybe an hour and 20 minutes straight. You do not get to stop hearing that ticking clock.
Mm-hmm. That's what builds up the tension.
Oh my God! And I'm like I said, I come from a music background, so I'm constantly paying attention to what the score is doing. And this score is, it's almost like this was a music video for an hour and 20 minute long piece of nothing but tension. And it's sort of, it's incredibly cinematic. Want to say Wagnerian, but nobody's gonna know what that means. And there's this singular moment of release, and the music is what is guiding you through this film. You're getting nothing but tension chords, nothing but strings against strings on pitches that are just next to each other, and it makes the ear just lose its mind because of the tension of these pitches. And then finally, in those brief moments of hope, you just get a major chord. You get the kind of chords that make you feel happy. And it is truly just a masterful score by Hans Zimmer. And of course, Nolan's never going to do another film without him, apparently, because Hans Zimmer has been...
Really?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I imagine. Up till this point, Hans Zimmer has been... I think he's done every single score.
Yeah.
There has to be a film before...
maybe like an older one.
The Dark Knight series. But I think in the last 10 years, Hans Zimmer has defined Nolan's work. When you go to see a Nolan film, what you are also seeing is a Zimmer score. Without those two together, the eye of Nolan and the ear of Zimmer, I think that you don't get the experience that you expect out of these films. But the score is something else, truly breathtaking. And if Zimmer doesn't walk away this year with a bundle of Oscars for his work on the music of Dunkirk, I am going to flip my car over and burn it down. Truly, he'll be robbed because this was a masterful work of music. But yeah, I mean that's my spiel on the score.
All right.
I don't want to get too into that yet.
Let's get into characters then.
Yeah,
definitely.
The main character, at least, there's a lot of main characters. It seems.
Really quick, I found out the main character's name is Tommy.
Tommy.
The one that we follow is Tommy.
Okay.
I don't think we ever find out his name in the movie, though. I think his name's never stated, or if it is, it's very brief.
Yeah.
If you're not from the UK or Britain, it can be hard to discern their accents.
Yeah, because they are speaking a completely different dialect.
It's English, definitely.
I think.
There is some French. There might have been German, but I couldn't tell. But there is French, because they are in France, of course. But some of them have Irish accents, Scottish accents, a lot of British accents, and some of them are hard to understand because they speak very quickly and they use some vernacular that we're not very familiar with in America.
But I think that to be fair, I think that's also a device.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing that happens on screen with the Nolan film is ever, I think, on accident. It's all very, very deliberate. And one of the things that I remember from Interstellar is, and this was a big complaint for a lot of people, especially during scenes where the Endurance is taking off and the madness of the engine roaring is just drowning out the dialogue between Anne Hathaway and Matthew McConaughey and things like that. And people were very upset about it. But I think the confusion is the effect that he's trying to get. And what I noticed myself feeling is that, sure, I didn't know exactly what Tom Hardy's character was saying in the moment. But the urgency in his voice, the expression in just the top half of his face that you get to see, that is what's driving the emotion that I'm feeling. And it's incredible. He's communicating feeling, not through the precise nature of his dialogue, but through the way it's delivered and through the expression of his actors. And that's a new frontier of filmmaking, in my opinion.
That's what I want to touch on, actually, because a lot of this movie, there's not that much dialogue.
Oh, no.
Very, very few dialogue in general. You're kind of just watching, like, people just moving around or their body language. You're seeing, like, how they move themselves in a way that creates, like, this tension that we keep talking about, their nervousness, or, yeah, just that. And I don't know how to describe it else, but I have to give it up to the actors who are able to convey this emotion to you. Because just like Emmett said, Tom Hardy, like, he's in a plane for, like, an hour and a half. Mm-hmm. He doesn't come out, and the only time he's talking, he has a face mask on him, and he's talking to another pilot in a different plane, and that's it. But you see, like, the expression in his eyes or the way he moves his face. There's, like, worry that causes in him when he realizes he's starting to run out of gas in his plane.
The way he flies the plane,
yeah.
Even the maneuvers, you can tell there's so much, like, every time he makes a hard turn, he holds his breath. You can hear it.
And I think that's a testament to Nolan's mastery. It's sort of like a martial artist tying his hands behind his back and adding weights to his ankles and then going into like a sparring match, because all that Nolan is letting himself work with are these very physical, very surface level human sort of materials, right? Expression, the sound of the voice, but not what the voice is actually saying, motion. This is how he's driving the story. And it is incredibly impressive for anybody to be able to tell a story. A lot of the time, I mean, I'm a big fan of good writing. Because good writing is wonderful and it helps flesh out a script. But I think that I can recall maybe like 7% of what I heard people say.
Did Nolan write it?
No. But I don't think that Nolan really.
Oh, he did write it.
Oh, did he?
He did write it.
Oh,
yeah.
sorry,
According to IMDb, he did write it.
So, but even then, anybody probably could have, I mean, like a writer half as good as Nolan could have written this. And the thing that's important is the length of, rather not the length, I'm sorry, but the thinness of the dialogue. It is so thin. And the story is not driven by what people are saying, but by the physicality of their actions, by the expressions on their faces, and by what's happening around them. Motion. And a lot of machines doing things are telling you the story. And like Eric was saying, with Tom Hardy's character arc, which is 145 minutes of him being in a plane, the direction that he pulls his plane in and the way that he does it, and when he accelerates, I mean, you get that gut drop feeling because you know he's running out of gas, but he's pushing the engine. That is somehow a more effective storytelling technique than him actually conveying to you directly that, oh my god, I'm so worried that I'm running out of gas. He didn't say a word about it, but you felt, and it was communicated clearly. That was the tension of his story. That is mind-blowing that anybody could even pull that off.
There was definitely that key point where, not when his gauge cluster was knocked out. It was when, I can't remember now. What was it? I think it was when he had to switch to reserve.
Yes.
And then that when he switched to reserve fuel, you knew there was no turning back. He was at that point committed, and in my opinion, like the best character in the movie because he's the hero.
Oh yeah.
Without him, he would not have taken out those, what was it, like last two ships or last two airplanes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that were gonna bomb the whole beach. Those civilian ships that had come from across the pond would not have made it.
No, and it's incredible what Tom Hardy can do with 3 seconds of screen time and 80% of his face completely concealed by this mask. When he switches to reserve in that moment towards the end of the film, you see the acceptance of his fate in his eyes, and you understand that he understands what's about to happen, that he's making this sacrifice, that is completely clear, and all he has to communicate that to the audience member is just his two eyes, and that's it, at an angle too, so you can only really see one. That's it. It's incredible, truly. I think you get to see his face right at the beginning of his introduction to the film, and then right at the end, and that is it. And somehow, an incredible amount of story is communicated to you. Tom Hardy really blew me away, and he hardly said a word. This whole film is that way.
The ending is really what got me, because you just see Hardy. You see Hardy actually land his plane, and for that glimmer of like those short few minutes where you see him land the plane and he lands safely because he had to pump like his wheels out of his plane. You make it seem like, oh, he's gonna just get on the boat and go home with everyone else, but no, you see him shoot up his plane, which I assume he did because you can't let British technology get into German hands. He
gets to scuttle the plane.
Yeah, but and then he stands there watching the plane burn, and you see him surrounded by German soldiers.
But he's smiling.
Yeah, you see this like acceptance within him, and he must have known that ever since he knew he was gonna run out of gas.
Yeah,
because he knew he had to land somewhere eventually. And there was a good chance he wasn't going to be able to land safely.
Well, there was this part where he opens his window cockpit, and it looks like he might inject. He might deploy a chute to escape, and maybe land on the beach, land in the water, whatever, and get picked up. But instead, he decides to close it and land the plane.
Yeah, and so there are a lot of questions there about what his motivation was for making that decision, and also his friend who ends up getting picked up by the civilians that we follow in the story has that same moment of trepidation, I guess is the word, where he is about to hit the ground. No, sorry, he's going to hit the ocean, and he opens his cockpit, or he's thinking about it, and he doesn't. I think that happens to him too, and so I'm not sure why Tom Hardy's character would have done that. I don't know what the acceptance would have been, or I'm sure he could have just let the plane go down. There's so much beach. Yeah, he could have gone home with everybody. So that's something that I'll have to talk with somebody about at some other point.
I don't know why Colin, I think his other pilot's name was. I don't know why Colin did that. Because, I don't know why he wouldn't eject, but maybe it was safer for him to land the plane in the water. So then if he was marooned, he wouldn't be in the water with a parachute.
It would give him more time in the plane.
Yeah,
right?
But I think for Tom Hardy's case, how I interpret it is when he opened that window, he could tell he was going to be able to land safely. But for him, maybe that was that last point of freedom for him before he knew he was going to be captured.
I didn't go down. I made it. I landed the plane.
You know what?
I think that's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
The whole story is about survival, getting it through to the end, including his plane. Right, his plane made it to the end, then he had to scuttle it, of course. But the whole thing's survival. For him, ejecting is like
not surviving.
He's been defeated. He's over. But then he landed it. He survived. I think that's a lot of that is what to do with it. And the whole thing, right? The guy, the first character, his name Tommy, right? He escapes, and every time he gets a glimpse of freedom, he gets put into some other horrendous situation, right? He gets into a boat, it sinks.
Yeah.
He goes onto a boat, the officer tells him to get off, right? It's just every time he's almost there, he has to go through another nightmare. But at the end, he survived.
I think with Tom Hardy's character too, and something that sort of just struck me now is that after Tom Hardy shoots down that last bomber and the men at Dunkirk on the coast are basically free to go home and they're going to be safe and they're going to be rescued, he is flying over them and he's seeing them cheer for him. And so I wonder if it isn't a sort of sacrifice not only for their lives but to preserve that sense of hope. They're seeing him as a symbol of their survival, of their freedom, and of hope for the war. Because look, he's just defeated these planes single-handedly, and he rescued all these men. They're cheering, and imagine maybe if they saw that plane go down, that would extinguish that sense of hope.
Yeah, he kept flying until he was out of sight to make it look like he made it home.
And so I wonder if maybe that's sort of what he was going for, at least Nolan with the script and with the narrative. And if that's the case, that is an incredibly poetic ending. And there is, again, no dialogue, no kind of retrospective monologue from a character to indicate that's what happened. But that's what I think I interpreted from that moment, is that he was trying to preserve the hope of the soldiers and of the future of the war, because it wasn't over yet at that point. I mean, they've got more war to fight.
I mean, the civilian ship captain, the older gentleman in the boat, he even says when you hear that, those
that engine of the
plane,
engine, it's the sweetest sound you'll hear.
The Spitfires, the British Spitfires. When you hear that Spitfire go by, it's the sweetest sound you'll hear. Yeah, but at the end of the movie, the engine's not on anymore. All you hear is the silent plane gliding by. That's true. And so they don't need to hear the engine to know the sound, to know the hope that's behind that, seeing that plane.
A sweeter sound is the sound of 300,000 men cheering because they're going to go home. And I think that was a very powerful moment. I also wanted to talk about the feeling of being suspended in mid-air for an hour and 45 minutes. Like, that is just a feat of cinematic strength. I have never had a theater experience like this. Even in Interstellar, which I to this day maintain was the most moving and unique theater experience of my life. So I'm a big fan of Nolan, obviously. But Interstellar had beats. It had cliffs and valleys. And then it was a very conventional story in that way. There were sort of 3 acts, and there was an incredible climax, and you can quantify that tale in that way. But the narrative of Dunkirk doesn't even move in one direction.
It doesn't. That's what I want to talk about really a lot about, is because the movie feels disjointed. Like two-thirds of the way through, it feels very disjointed. When the movie first shows, you see the number 1, it says the mole, and it says 1 week. The next scene, it'll say 2 see 1 day, and then you see Tom Hardy in a plane. It'll be 1 hour in the air. So at first I was trying to think, what do these things mean? But I can see now, I think this is the time it takes for them to get out or to leave the beach. Yeah. From the mole, it would take a week. From the sea, it would take only a day. And then from the air, it only takes an hour. Yeah.
Yes. And it's an hour to get from Dunkirk to the nearest town of it on England coast. Must be incredibly frustrating. It's going to be an hour sail
that would
to get
suck
to Dunkirk.
Really bad if I was on that beach. Right. Just to know that it's just an hour away. And so it has to be said, and if you're still listening and you haven't watched this film, I don't know why you would be spoiling everything, but the narrative doesn't move forward in one direction. And that is not to say that time is somehow part of the story. But there is a moment where we're seeing what's Murphy? Cillian
Murphy.
Cillian Murphy. There's a moment where you see him dilapidated and shell shocked on a civilian boat. He's been picked up.
Actually, it looked like it might have been the frigate. Maybe.
He got sank by a U-boat. He says, and then in the next scene, immediately you see him before that happens, and so there's a moment of like, oh, I am not seeing a single narrative thread being weaved. There are several narrative threads, all leading to maybe a single point, and then it's just not happening in chronological order.
It's divided into 3 because you see the land, the sea, and the air. You see how Tommy interprets that whole week going by of him trying to get off. And then during that week, as that goes by, you see and that last day when the civilian boats come to pick up the soldiers, you see that captain, and it's just that one day of him just leaving the harbor and then just going over. And then for Tom Hardy, you see it from the perspectives of also Tommy and the civilian captain, but for Tom Hardy, it's only an hour.
Yeah. And
So
it's incredible. You're seeing a week, a day, and an hour story being told at once.
it's lining up. They all
Yes.
line up, which is what makes it amazing. In a like Memento kind of way too, except Memento goes reverse. But like, yeah, it's like two different starting points, but it all has the same ending.
Yes.
And the perspectives from it is what really stands out the most, all while keeping this sense of tension throughout it.
Now, I don't know if you enjoyed that aspect of it. Would you call that a positive?
I think that it definitely had something going for it. It was, I think at first, for some viewers, maybe your average viewer might be confused at first.
A little frustrating too,
A
because you're not sure what's going on.
because you're not sure what's going on. But then as if you stick with it and you kind of watch it, you start to piece it together. It comes together like puzzle pieces. Just it fits together and you figure out exactly what was going on. And I think maybe even I'm sure it's on purpose, but I'm sure the soldiers on that beach were feeling that same kind of confusion.
Oh yeah,
And I think that is to make you feel that way. No one really knew, when's the air support coming? When are the ships coming? You don't really know that either. You just kind of know they're on their way. They're working hard to get these troops out, but you don't know when they're going to be there. You don't know when their salvation is going to come. So I think it really puts you in it puts in perspective. It lets you see it the way the soldiers kind of felt it, and they eventually they do get saved. But in that time it's just it's all that uncertainty. It must really be weighing down on them.
Oh yeah, and in order to experience the tension that I think Nolan was going for, he has to give you straight up uncertainty, and I think about a lot sort of like storytelling devices in film, and the last film that I saw that did something that I'd never seen before was Arrival.
Oh, I was gonna say, it was like, this reminds me of Arrival.
Exactly. That is a writer, a director, that is a team of people getting together and saying, how do we tell a story in a way that has never been told before, or at least how do we take a technique that's common and make it new again? And Arrival did that with it's giving you story pieces in a way that you're used to taking them and accepting them, and at the end the twist is that you're seeing a future instead of a past. Sorry, spoilers. But if you haven't seen Arrival at this point, totally your fault.
Watch it.
Yeah, please go watch it. It's an incredible film. But that was an experiment. I feel like that movie was built around that twist. It was built around a new storytelling device and breaking convention. And I think that Nolan was seeking that, maybe not as the centerpiece of this film, but as a component that completed it, because there was that shock moment when I saw Cillian Murphy as part of the ocean tale, and then I saw Cillian Murphy again as part of the other tale of the land, where you see him in two places sort of at once, but you realize that time is not moving, for the audience member at least, not moving in one direction. Well, it's moving in one direction, but it's not moving in order. And so that was, to me, part of the reason why this film is so unique and effective and absolutely awesome, and you should definitely see it, is because Nolan is experimenting with new ways to tell stories. And when directors are looking for new ways to tell stories, audience members get brand new and exciting film experiences. And it's an awesome time to be a moviegoer because of that alone.
The thing is, like, as great as this movie I think it is, I feel like it's too technical. Like, I could tell he had to plan all this out.
Oh yeah.
This just didn't like align magically. And because it's so technical with the timing, how the movie is tense, the way these like three separate characters in three different arcs all line up together in three different timelines, it kind of removes the soul out of it. I never felt like, besides the feeling of apprehension, I never felt like very emotional towards the characters. When George died, I was like, oh, well, I hate Cillian Murphy for that and his character, but otherwise, like, I didn't feel for the boy dying.
Yeah.
It was a great resolution to his character arc when his best friend, right? Because they're not siblings.
Yes,
when
best friend.
Yeah, when his best friend put his name in the paper and called him a hero for saving those people at Dunkirk, but like he didn't really do anything. But besides that gripe, like, yeah, I just feel like I came out of that movie experience feeling, wow, this is a wonderful technical movie. like I appreciate the skill it took to do this, but I felt very disconnected to it during. Besides Tom Hardy, Tom Hardy's great in this movie.
Yeah, it's hard to feel connected to the characters, other than because you don't really find out much about them as people. You find out about the situation they're in at the moment, currently.
You're just dropped in there in the middle of all of
exactly.
this. Yeah, and so this might be unpopular opinion warning, but trying to see this from a film enthusiast mindset, I wonder if that isn't also intentional, and maybe I'm giving Nolan a lot of credit here, because we expect character development in film.
He's sucking his dick pretty hard, bro.
I'm sucking his dick. I love Christopher Nolan. And the dude doesn't seem to do anything by accident. And so that is something that I walked away from as well, is that this film has nothing as far as character development goes. And character development seems to me to be the heart of film now. Even huge franchises like Marvel movies are literally driven by the fact that you just care about Captain America. He's just a cool character.
Yeah. Very strong emotional attachment now.
And you followed
Absolutely.
him since the beginning.
Yeah, and so emotional attachment is how you have been, all of us, I think, as moviegoers, have been really roped into being invested in these characters. And here is somebody who's saying that I'm not going to use that at all. I'm going to tell a very physical and very human, but otherwise wordless story. And so I do wonder if this isn't Nolan on purpose removing a very conventional storytelling technique from his sort of palette or his toolbox to tell a different kind of story. Even Interstellar, when you get down to it, the themes are just love and family and the power of love, and it is a very conventional emotional script, despite the incredible set pieces and being visually stunning and otherwise some of the best film work in the industry. I will stand by that to the day I die. But here's Nolan taking a completely different turn in the way that you tell a story, abandoning character development, abandoning orderly chronological storytelling. Even though time isn't necessarily a storytelling technique, it's just out of order because you've got 3 different stories you got to fit together at once. It is, to me, Nolan masterfully juggling a whole bunch of stuff at once, but I don't think that's going to be communicated very well to mass audiences, and I think that's going to be part of one of the biggest criticisms and weaknesses of the film.
Now that you say that, I kind of see why it comes off, or I kind of see why I think he did that now. I can see his purpose, because the movie comes off very cold.
Yes.
Like when you're watching it, like what you said before, you feel disattached to characters, you don't feel emotional, but also when you watch the film, you're right next to the ocean. There's a lot of blue. It's always really cloudy. There's very few shots of sunlight or sunshine, and that's always when
the planes are above the clouds.
Yeah, or when there's a 5-second scene of just joy or bliss of the soldiers or anything like that. But the movie's very cold. Even when soldiers are in water, you can feel how, even though Cillian Murphy's character said the water's not that cold, you feel cold. It makes you feel wet. And maybe through the technique of filming the movie that way, it also conveys that emotion to the viewer. So maybe that's why he decided to portray the movie that way.
One of the shots that you see a lot in the film that I chuckled a little bit because I was like, this is very clever, is that you never see the plane before you hear it. And when you hear it, you always get a close-up of an actor or of a huge group of people all looking up as the camera looking down starts panning from up above. So there's that sensation of a person looking up and a camera from above it looking sort of down at that
moving
person.
Upward, right?
Yeah, and you always hear the hum of the plane, but even before you hear it, you see the dread of the soldiers, and then you hear the engines, and then you see the plane. And I think that sensation of dread, and it happens I think 4 times in the film where it's they do a raid a few times, and it's the same way every time, and so you get that lingering sensation of when is something going to kill me next. And I think the dread is something that they're going for, and it's very easy, I won't say easy, but it is certainly conventional to create dread by putting characters that you care about in danger. It is very difficult and new and unique to derive a sense of dread from seeing just soldiers who are otherwise nameless, who you don't really care for in the way that you would care for characters in film, seeing them in life-threatening situations, seeing just mass death from people being thrown overboard and from ships going up in flames. These are very terrifying things to witness. If you were there in person, I would imagine it's just dreadful. And so dread, I think, is one of the driving forces of this film. It's like, when are we going to reach that next point of considerable dread? And then when it happens, you are left silent and shocked until the engines hum again. And then here come the planes, and holy shit, get down, get ready to go again. It's really incredible that I would feel. And I had that moment. I sat forward and put my hand over my mouth because I was just so not ready for what I was experiencing. And I had that sense of dread. And somehow Nolan managed to make me feel something as powerful as dread without letting me get to know Harry Styles. You know?
You're always expecting it.
Yeah.
It's like the music, the way it's filmed, everything just leads up to that sense of dread.
You're just waiting for the next disaster.
Yes.
Really. You know they're not out of it. And when they are, you're like, this is too good to be true. Like, he looks like he's safe. Everyone's smiling and because they're safe. And then all of a sudden,
eating jam and toast.
And then all of a sudden, boom, torpedo from U-boat.
Yeah.
You know, like, it just hits you. And it kind of, there's a lot of foreshadowing that happens. You know, Cillian Murphy says he was hit by a U-boat. And then and then it flashes back, and then you watch a ship get hit by a torpedo.
You see the civilian ships from that story arc. You see it half sunk, and then a few bodies in the water waving at Tom Hardy as he flies by, and then you flash forward in the next scene, and they haven't sunk yet. That's an incredible. It's very interesting as a moviegoer to see that happening. To see foreshadowing that isn't even. It is not even thinly veiled. It's not veiled at all. It's showing you what's going to happen, and then jumping back, and then jumping forward, and jumping back again constantly, and then still feeling tension, and that is I honestly do believe that's going to be what people dislike about this film, and so I think that it'd be worth talking about maybe our own criticisms, and maybe the criticisms that we expect from general audiences, because I think this film just was released this weekend, right? Or are we 1 week late?
About 2 weeks ago. It came out the 21st. Today is the 28th. Yeah.
It was a week ago.
So it was a week ago.
I do expect the sort of convoluted way that the story is told, and I do expect the lack of character development to be a big hit for Nolan, and I expect this to be maybe just above The Dark Knight Rises and like Nolan sort of if you're gonna rank his films, this isn't gonna shatter minds in the way that maybe Inception did or Interstellar.
Yeah.
And
another podcast.
yeah. Oh, and I'd love to do that. And I think it's because Nolan was trying to be very bold in using new storytelling techniques. And I think, unfortunately, when you do that, when you try to tread into new frontiers in your craft, you're going to receive backlash because people aren't conditioned to experience stories in that way.
He's definitely a trailblazer in his own right, you know? I think because of his success, he's allowed to do movies like this.
Oh, yeah.
Anyone else try to do this? Can't think of anyone besides maybe Spielberg. Remember Denis Villeneuve?
Even Spielberg had to do Jaws to earn that pedestal where he's been for the rest of since for the last 40 years. And I think that Nolan is currently in like, if we're going to compare him to Spielberg, he's in his post Jaws phase. He can do no wrong, and if he has a pitch for a studio, they're just going to say yes. Mm-hmm. How do you say no to Christopher Nolan, especially after everything he's done? Even something like this is incredible. So yeah, do you have any specific criticisms? Do you think?
You know what? Criticisms being just that, like Jimmy said, the technical aspects of it. May not be for everybody. I wouldn't say lack of character development really affects it negatively. I think, it is a tale of survival. You really don't know much about these characters, but you know that they're trying to survive. You know they're trying to live. And you root for them the entire time. Like, you're cheering for them. You want them to survive. You see people die, and you say, it's not, it's really sad those guys died. But then you see the main character, and you see that all the stuff he goes through, every turn, he barely escapes death. And every time, you're just like, oh, thank God he's alive.
Yeah.
So I don't think... Even though you don't learn much about him, as a human, you want him to make it. You want him to live. You see the pilot. The pilot goes down. You're rooting for him. You're like, wait, don't crash. Even at the end, like when he's pumping the to get the manual release to get his landing gear to go down, and he's inches away from the ground. They're not quite there yet. You're just like, come on.
I was internally cheering. When it finally got ready and he hit the sand. I had a moment where like my hand kind of went up from my lap because I wanted to cheer because I somehow was invested in Tom Hardy's character, and so I think it's strange. I would say that this film is a little bit. You cannot apply conventional criticism to something like this because this is not a conventional story. I can't even in my mind break this up into 3 acts, which is how most films are kind of told. And maybe you could. Maybe if you broke down the script, you could say this is Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. But fresh out of the theater, it's been maybe 2 hours since we were in there, I don't feel like I saw a film in 3 acts. I saw one climax. As soon as the music began swelling and the clock started ticking. And it's literally the sound of tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock for the duration of the film. As soon as it started, we were in a sort of climax. And we just are perpetually there. And it doesn't let you go. And so it feels like... How do you justly and fairly apply conventional criticisms to a film that just doesn't tell story the way that the story is expected to be told?
I certainly agree with that too. For me, like one of my gripes is that I really like Tom Hardy's character in his arc. It's like the best part of the whole movie.
Ace pilot.
Yeah,
what's not to love,
right?
He's the. I don't think he wasn't the captain. The captain was shot down early on.
I
think so because it started with 3 planes. They looked around. They said, "I don't see." They said his name. I think they might have said like leader.
Just sounded like.
Yeah, it really just sounds like
yeah, that's what it sounds like.
Accurate.
I don't see captain. But yeah, that's how pilots talk, and it sounds cool. It sounds
like almost like Bane.
It's authentic. Yeah. It's authentic. Yeah, Tom Hardy Bane, right? It's authentic.
Yeah, it's a terrible Bane version.
But yeah, besides Tom Hardy and then the captain of the civilian ship, like Tommy, the main character, I did not really care for him. I didn't like his entire arc, really. I didn't like. There's a particular scene after he befriends what we find out later is a French soldier who took British soldiers' clothes so he could try to escape with the British.
Saw that coming immediately, by the way. Just wanted to know.
Oh yeah? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
I thought he was suspicious. I didn't think he was French.
Remember,
I thought he was German.
Well, because they show the foot coming out of the sand and then he's tying the boot.
Yeah,
and I was
exactly.
like, he took this guy's clothes.
Well, yeah, that's what I thought too. I thought maybe at first I was like, well, maybe he's just a British soldier who, he needed a new shoe, so he was like stealing it from a body. But then I thought that was something weird that he just never talked.
Didn't speak. Yeah.
Now, I know that Cillian Murphy's character was shell shocked, so maybe he was just shell shocked, and he definitely portrayed that in some instances, like when he got onto the boat and he took that he went the other way and he tried to get some fresh air and he was just like it seemed like he was trembling but he was also like, thank God, almost kind of thing. But he never spoke, so that was fishy. Yeah, and eventually it was like, well, why don't you talk? Why don't you say anything? And then they finally pointed out, and then it reveals his character.
Well, the pieces came together immediately because there are French soldiers in the first few minutes of the story. I'm like, oh yeah, obviously he's French. That was me just like, okay, well, what are the pieces of the narrative in front of me? What's on the table? And I just immediately pieced it together. So that didn't surprise me, unfortunately. And I don't know if Nolan even intended for that to be a twist. But you were saying you didn't like the story arc at all of the land.
Yeah, I didn't like it. And what really struck. Okay, for my first thing was. There was a scene where the group of soldiers and our main character, Tommy, or one of the main characters, is stuck inside the boat and they're being shot at by Germans inside this boat trying to wait for the tide to come up so they can leave. And they realize the boat is gaining so much water that there needs to be someone that leaves. And they try to get the French soldier to leave. And another soldier comes up to Tommy and says... Oh man, I can't remember his lines because
you're next if you.
It's like, what are you saying?
It's like
you're basically telling him you're telling the French soldier the French soldier's gonna leave or they're gonna shoot him and kick him and take his body out, and then if he's gonna stick up for him and not let them kick him out, he's gonna be next. They're gonna kick him out.
Well, before that, he said our survival is more important or something about their particular survival. It's like. It's either us or them kind of thing.
Yeah, they can't save both. They can't save both.
Yeah, there was no... that's a very human thing, and I get that. Mm-hmm. But, in a movie which shows, heroism from both Tom Hardy and the civilian captain, which I guess is, a good contrast, but, man, it was just, I don't know. I just didn't like... I didn't like that attachment, I guess.
I think I can pinpoint it. So... In typical war movies, or even this, where you see the heroics of the ace pilot, you see that these characters are, and then even the civilian ship captain, you can just tell how brave they are, how they're just going into combat. And then you have these soldiers who are not fighting for their lives, running for their lives to get away from combat. So you get like this, it almost looks cowardly.
Yeah,
where,
I think that's it.
In the entire rest of the movie, he doesn't even pick up a gun.
Oh, that's true.
He's unarmed the rest of the movie. He basically,
after that first initial scene, he doesn't have a gun.
Oh, there's a lot of soldiers who still have guns. And there's tons of guns on the ground that he could probably pick up. But he never picks one up. All he's concerned with is going home. He doesn't want to fight anymore. He's done. And a lot of that, from a soldier's point of view, it's cowardly. But at the same time, he tries, he's brave in the sense that he's trying to get through all these dangerous situations with his life still intact. And then even risks his own life for someone else's who no one else values. Mm. So
I guess there's a heroicness in
there's
that.
a redeeming aspect there. But then, ends up, being kind of, for nothing because the French guy drowned.
Yeah, he drowned anyway.
And there's one thing.
Yeah.
He's the one.
Do you remember the shot with the hand kind of drifting?
Oh, that was him.
He got stuck on some kind of
chain, I think, yeah. And
he couldn't get out and he drowned. And that's one of the, for me, whenever I watch, and I knew this would go into the movie, but I think about back when I watched Pearl Harbor. And those ships,
so long.
Those ships. I know it's a long movie,
yeah.
But when those ships sink in Pearl Harbor, and they're the soldiers they're trying to get out, and
that shot,
and you watch as their hands, you see the life disappear, and it's so hard to watch because you're like, oh my god, they were so close to fresh air, and
that scene that has haunted me for years. I think it's there's a break in the hull of the ship as it's going down, and it's just a cluster of hands just desperately reaching through that break, and then the water just swallows them up, and it's like, oh, that's terrible.
And you see the life just drift away from them. Or I think the one of them, they're holding a guy's hand, and then you see the hand go limp, and it's like, no, he was so close.
Watching people drown sucks.
Watching people drown, watching people die slowly in general is hard to watch.
People that don't deserve it.
And they say drowning is one of the most painful ways to go.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think I want to say that was not a redeeming thing for the French guy because I'm sure he didn't mean to die. Yeah. But I mean, he died. And his and he was on country. He was at home.
He was in France.
The only thing is I can say for the French soldier who was trying to escape, besides him being being a coward or anything like that, is I kind of understand why he was trying to get out. There was lots of French soldiers trying to escape because they didn't want to die. They were afraid, and the British obviously said it's our boys first because we're trying to get them back to our home. But at the same time, those French soldiers don't have a home to go back to. It's all German now. So at the same time, I'm feeling for the guy. I'm like, I totally understand why he's trying to get out. He has every right to live as much as these guys do. But at the same time, he was kind of being sneaky and hiding it.
Yeah, it's just because of his actions, it makes you feel even more detached than you already are. And then at the very end, where they're when Tommy's on the train with the other British soldiers, and they start cheering for them back, and I was like.
You feel like they don't deserve it.
They don't deserve it.
And they know they don't deserve it.
Those cheers are for Tom Hardy and those captains of those ships who picked everybody up.
And there was that part with the pilot, and then he was on the boat, and then the soldier's like,
"What were you?
Yeah, what good you did, right?
Whatever's
and it's like this guy just
probably saved your life.
Yeah, just because he got shot down and he's wearing a clean suit because he's a pilot, doesn't mean that he didn't risk his life to just help save everyone else's. It's just he wasn't the one pilot that.
Oh my god, his scene made me so anxious. I thought he was gonna die.
Oh yeah, just pounding against the glass, really.
Oh my god,
really crazy.
My favorite part about that was when Tom Hardy's plane flies by and he sees the hand doing this, and
he
thinks he's waving that I'm okay.
Yeah,
but he's actually he's waving because he can't get his hand out. He can't get out of the cockpit.
But
that's a nice dynamic. I did
really love when he gets picked up out of the ocean and he says afternoon. As he's getting pulled up into the boat. The kid pulls him up in the boat. I think he says good afternoon to the kid as he's you just almost drowned, dude.
Yeah, you get that.
He's really cool. That dude is probably the coolest guy.
He looks famous. Who is he?
He looks like Simon Pegg if he was handsome.
Yeah, it's that's not Simon Pegg though.
But it's just a very British face.
He looked like Simon Pegg, and who's the guy who did the robot for Rogue One?
Oh, Alan Tudyk?
Alan Turk?
Tudyk, yeah.
Yeah,
but he's an American. Yeah, the from Firefly.
But he can do a British accent, though.
I'm sure he can.
Besides that, though.
Alan Tudyk can do anything.
No, I like... It is kind of from a soldier's perspective, it does look like he was the chair force, right? They only see him not in the air. Not doing what his job is while the soldiers are on the ground fighting. Yeah. And I think a lot of Air Forces get that kind of criticism. Yeah. Where you didn't really have to do much work. You weren't all right on the front line, but he really was. at least the
Oh,
front
yeah, he
line of
was
the
there.
sky. Yeah, it's just that because he had been shut
I
down,
know.
he didn't get to do his the rest of his job.
I think
Right.
that's what makes Tom Hardy even cooler because he
Yeah.
didn't get shot down.
He's the dogfighter, which is really cool.
But that's the subtleties and the mastery of Nolan's storytelling. I mean, the dude did that on purpose. Like the line at the beginning when the British officer is telling all the French guys, "Don't come here. This is just British dudes." What he is communicating to you is trying to help you understand the situation and the plight of the French soldiers, without telling you that the French soldiers are in plight. If you have some historical context of your own, I think that it'll help. But just that scene of that officer being like, "No, this is a British ship. This is for British soldiers," helps you understand there's that disconnect, and that these French soldiers also feel this hopelessness, even more so because they don't have anyone coming for them, and they don't have a home to go back to the same way that the British
They're
soldiers.
stuck. They're
But he
trapped.
does that by having a British officer shouting at a bunch of Frenchmen. He doesn't. It's not exposition. It's a human scene. And if you think about it for a few more seconds, you realize, oh my God, he's telling a story. Same way when the pilot is getting shouted at by that one soldier, telling him like, "Where were you?" What he's communicating to you, and then also all the crowds cheering for the Tommy character and Harry Styles character. They're cheering for them even though they didn't fight, and the one that fought is receiving this criticism. And that's just another, I don't know what kind of commentary he's trying to, I mean, you can derive some kind of commentary from like misplaced honor, maybe the theme of that, but it is just adding more humanity to the story without dialogue, without character development. It's very interesting. Nolan, I feel like, is playing chess with our hearts, with our with our film going mind. He's like playing chess with us. Every little motion is part of a larger play. And these little lines are full of context, and if you let them mean something to you, then the whole film becomes more substantial. But I did want to say really quickly something that I wanted to bring up with the story arc of these soldiers who are just trying to survive. You got to also remember they're children. I mean, these guys are so young.
Oh yeah, they look like they're 18, 19.
They look so young, and that is. I mean, if I were 17 on a battlefield and I knew that I was stuck and I was starving and there were airplanes, I mean, I could not promise anybody that I would be anything less than what they were, or anything more rather than what they were. I would be as cowardly as they were probably. I just want to go home, want to see my family.
They're just children,
Yeah, they're just kids,
and they were probably drafted into the combat service.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of there are a lot of volunteers, I'm sure, but a lot of them were drafted. They were. Conscripted to go fight, a war that maybe they didn't even want to fight.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I'm sure, I think things were different back then, a lot of national pride, lots of, Germans are the enemy. I don't know if the same stuff would fly in modern days, but back in, World War II, everything was like, like they were British, they were patriotic. Right?
It's a little more cut and dry.
Yeah.
There were clear sides, and it wasn't, as we have, and not to make this suddenly a podcast about geopolitics. That's what I do on my YouTube channel, but I mean, now we have wars against ideas, and back then we had wars against nations, and that is a very clear-cut thing. But that clarity is lost when you're on the beaches, when you're starving, and when bullets are flying at you. You have no idea where they're coming from. And so I think the story arc of the sort of the land section of this film was to convey the chaos of being in like boots on the ground war and being a kid dealing with all of that. And so I also felt that these people did almost nothing redeeming. Harry Styles did snag the French soldier's pack, tried to get him to stop holding the plugs on the boat so that he could leave. The French soldier died anyway. Even though Harry Styles had been like threatening his life, there's that moment of redemption for a second. But it's not about that. And again, going back to what I said before, I think that this is Nolan purposefully not using character development to tell a story. I think he's deliberately evading it.
So what are your gripes then?
My gripes, I don't even know if I really have any, and that seems terribly. I don't want to say that because as somebody that loves to critique film and to analyze film, no film is perfect. The idea of the perfect film is absolutely that just doesn't happen. Nothing can be, but I don't want to apply conventional criticisms to this film because this film is not a conventional story. The format is something that I usually go after. dialogue, character development are things that mean a lot to me. But what this film has forced me to do is to analyze the biases of film critique that I've had cemented into my mind by 20 plus years of watching movies. And so I really don't know if I can criticize this film in the way that I would criticize Doctor Strange for having a very weak sort of lead or whatever, or maybe I went to go see Baby Driver and I didn't enjoy the performance of so on and so forth, or the chemistry or character arcs, any of those things that I usually go after. I just don't feel like I can here because this isn't that kind of movie. It's very, very different. And maybe the only thing that I would say, and maybe just for the sake of conversation, applying conventional criticisms, there was way too much abstractness in the first 20 minutes of the film. I had no idea what was going on.
Oh yeah, that first 20 minutes to half an hour, you're just watching like people do things, and you're not really sure what's really going on.
Except that section where he's just under fire from all directions,
yeah.
And then even when the French soldiers fire at him, that's pretty action packed.
But it's just like
it's just stuff happening.
But it's one line,
story.
Yeah, it's like a single line of dialogue, and until like even after the beach bombing, all you've heard is
him say that he's English.
That's it. That's all you have, and it is just no dialogue, just very loud noise. And I understand that Nolan was doing that on purpose, and for that I respect it. But as just letting me be just a moviegoer, it was very hard for me to feel invested in the film until about maybe 20-15 minutes, once the clock started literally ticking in the score. And that's when the movie feels more like it's moving in a direction. But there is a feeling where in the first 15 minutes, like if I recommended this film to my mom or something who was not an avid moviegoer, I know for a fact that's the same thing that she would say. She's like, I had no idea what was happening in the beginning.
It'd be like whoosh right over your head.
That is the conventional moviegoer's, I think, reaction to this film, is that the beginning is so vague that people are probably just going to check out. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, just for quick clarification, Harry Styles' character, his name is Alex, and he was the one that pointed the gun at Gibson, the French character, inside the boat. Mm-hmm. He was the one that says, you better speak English, or if you do, you probably have a thick accent.
German accent.
Yeah, a German accent.
Yeah. I actually really liked Harry Styles' character. I mean,
he's in it for like 2 seconds.
right. But I liked the Harry Styles portrayal, right?
Okay.
Like I was telling Jimmy before this. Apparently, Ed Sheeran made an appearance in Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
And people were really upset because it wasn't a Game of Thrones character; it was Ed Sheeran, right? In this movie, it wasn't Harry Styles; it was the character that
that's
you were
true.
watching.
I didn't even know it was
Right,
Harry Styles.
yeah. And anyone who didn't know who Harry Styles is wouldn't know even that it was being portrayed by Harry Styles. But in that Game of Thrones episode, and this is spoilers for Game of Thrones, but you probably saw on the internet like he was in Game of Thrones, and it's like, and people were like, "What the hell is Ed Sheeran doing in Game of Thrones?" Like,
I think a lot of people were worried about what happened in Game of Thrones happening to Dunkirk, where you have this international megastar playing a role in a film or appearing in a very popular television show, and pulling you out of the narrative because suddenly you're seeing
immersion breaking.
Yeah, you're seeing that pop star. You're not seeing the character. But Harry Styles, for what it's worth, and this film was not a performance-heavy film, but he didn't distract me. I didn't feel like I was watching a pop star's debut into Hollywood. This wasn't like The Rock or something, right? Where it's just like, he's not the most talented actor in the world, but he's charming to watch. And no, it wasn't distracting. Harry Styles fit right in. He performed. I just don't think that this film is a film that you can look at and say, oh, this is going to stretch your performance muscles very much. I think the person who worked the hardest to perform was probably Tom Hardy, and the reason why is because he had so little to work with. Mm-hmm. Sitting in one area, most of his face covered, that's not a lot to work with. And to be able to emote in that situation is incredibly impressive. And like all the civilian characters were fine. I think they were the most conventional characters. But Harry Styles and the Tommy character, I don't know who the actor is, and all of those soldiers who were just trying to escape, their whole story was all physical. It was mostly without dialogue. This is not a performance-heavy film. And so if you're looking for another scene like Matthew McConaughey's in Interstellar, when he sees all of the footage of his family aging instantly and crying that horrifyingly emotional moment, you're not going to get that here because this isn't a human story in that way. It isn't an emotional story in that way. It is human. I just think that it is not interested in telling you a character story. It's interested in telling you a very broad, sweeping 300,000 people on a beach story, and I think it does that very successfully.
So Tommy's character, his actor, his name is Fionn Whitehead.
Really?
Yeah.
These must be British.
Yeah,
That's a very British people.
Yeah. But to build on what you said, yeah, this movie is not a character-driven story. And I'm not sure how to feel about that, because sometimes I think character-driven stories actually bore me sometimes. And so thinking this movie isn't driven by characters, you would think I would be really, really rah-rah for it, but I don't know. I think it lacks, maybe it's too devoid of it, that pushes it to more of a negative direction. But although a really great movie.
I think a lot of people are going to say that about it, that they didn't have they didn't feel that character attachment, and I'm willing to bet money that Christopher Nolan was sitting down in a room with his producer or whoever he's working with, and he knows. I mean, he's a filmmaker. He works in the industry. He understands how important character development is to storytelling. I mean, that is essentially what is driving the industry right now. The biggest property in the world, I think, Marvel. I mean, all of these films, these superhero movies, these very fantasy stories, they are only redeeming because their characters are fun to watch. And you only go back to pay another $21.50 for an IMAX ticket to see Iron Man do the same thing again because you love Iron Man. You love Tony Stark.
You love Robert Downey Jr.
You love Robert Downey, yeah. You love these very powerful character performances. Character development is a gold mine. And so I have to wonder, and I suspect that Nolan knows this, and wanted to make a film that didn't rely on the same techniques that other films do. I think that this is him challenging himself. I understand. I'm sure that, and I'm not sure what the box office numbers look like. I think the Dunkirk is doing very well monetarily, and so
it's
that's
tied for first with the Emoji Movie. At least that's what I heard.
The Emoji Movie cannot be that high.
No, the Emoji Movie had really bad ratings, and that's all over the internet. Apparently, it had a 0% Rotten Tomatoes, but Dunkirk's I think has done pretty well. I mean, I haven't seen the Rotten Tomatoes score for Dunkirk. I always look at movie ratings kind of, with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
But
give it a few more weeks.
Yeah. Once the movie comes out or it's been out for a few years, then you can really, I feel like, measure it because then you have more of an audience reaction, more overall.
I think that Dunkirk is an example of a director deliberately trying to tell a story in a new and different kind of way, or at least abandoning the conventions of storytelling in film right now, especially in like these AAA box office summer hits. He's telling a totally different kind of tale, and being successful in doing that is impressive, especially in this sort of landscape of movies, because Spider-Man was great. Wonder Woman was a breath of fresh air from DC because that had character, and I mean, I know that you and Jimmy and I have our contentions on DC properties, and we can do a whole episode on that, but Nolan, like you said, is a trailblazer, and he is just breaking new ground with Dunkirk. It's going to work against him for some people, but I think that he's going to be successful because you see Christopher Nolan's name, you're going to put your ass in that seat and you're going to buy that ticket because he is always good. He's never been bad.
And on that note, it looks like we've reached our hour for today's podcast. What are your guys' final thoughts on the movie?
Well, do we want to do ratings at least?
I mean, you have to develop a scale on what to do this rating.
Okay, let's just go on. Do you recommend watching it or not?
Okay, yeah, absolutely. I think that that this is an example of an awesome summer blockbuster that is not a superhero movie, and that tells it, or that challenges the viewer. I think that Nolan respects your intellect, and you're going to have a completely different kind of experience than you expect to have watching not only a war movie, but just a movie in general. So I recommend it, absolutely.
Yeah, I recommend it too. I mean, I always enjoy seeing movies with a historical perspective, not a fictionalized story, based on true events kind of thing. And I always like the, I don't know, I'm not a history major or anything, so I don't know how historically accurate it all is, but it looks, pretty authentic. I'm pretty sure they used, mostly, either real or replica uniforms. So I like the authenticity. I think it tells a real, human story of survival and heroism, and not just from the military, but from civilians as well. So it's definitely a good watch, and I highly recommend it.
What I think it's for is if you're someone who really enjoys movies, not like just movies because they're entertaining, but you like movies because they are movies, and you like the craftsmanship, you like the technical aspect, you like a Nolan, like Emmett does, and you want to suck his dick all day. Like if you like those kind of movies, definitely is a must see.
With whipped cream and everything.
But if you're someone who likes character driven movies, or you're expecting to be
Conventional story.
Yeah, conventional story, be captivated by these characters, no, don't go see it. I recommend just waiting until it comes on Netflix, or trying to watching at home on Redbox or anything like that.
That shit, baby.
Yeah, we are not sponsored by Redbox or Netflix.
Not yet.
No, we are not. But yeah, just wait for that if you're that kind of audience. But definitely, if you enjoy these kinds of movies, I highly suggest going to see Dunkirk. I'm not a super big fan of it, but I am a big fan of the work that it took to make it.
Absolutely. Yeah, so thanks, guys. This has been awesome.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
Episode 1 of Mov.ie.
Does anyone want to plug anything? Anyone want where you can find anybody?
Yes, I imagine that if you're still listening to this podcast, you probably came from me directing you from my YouTube channel. But if you're here because you just want to hear a cool movie podcast and you don't know who I am or what I do on YouTube, I will leave links in whatever platform that we decide to put this up on. I do just politics and social commentary, and so I always recommend people go and watch those videos. I produce a lot of videos every week, so you have a lot of content to look forward to there. What about you guys?
I'll be making a Twitter. This is Jimmy, by the way. I'll be making a Twitter soon for this podcast, and then also a webpage and a Facebook page. So tune in for that, probably through Christian's channels of reaching you.
Yeah.
This is Eric, and
you'll
see me around.
Yeah, let's reintroduce ourselves. Emmett here, and thank you guys for listening to Move.ie for the first episode. I hope we have a lot of episodes to look forward to in the future.
We'll see you guys next time.
All right, later, guys.